manager from the 2014-15 season. So I picked out this season because this season was quite an interesting one in the Premier League. Southampton qualified for Europe, Swansea came 8th, Stoke came 9th. All three of those clubs are now in the Championship. The three teams who were relegated all got less than 35 points, and West Ham qualified for Europe due to fair play. So it was a pretty interesting season, to say the least. So I thought, why don't we look at the manager who ended the season that year with your club, how they would do with this current squad of players. And I can tell you now that it will produce, or at least in my eyes, some very, very interesting league tables. So I'm going to go 20 all the way to 1 in order. And just a disclaimer, it is the manager who ended that season for you. So some of the clubs have multiple managers, but it's the one who ended that year. I can do this for other seasons if you like, but let's begin. So, in 20th place we have Luton. No real surprise here, as back in 2014, Luton were playing their first season back in the Football League for 6 years. So as you can imagine, their manager wasn't really a Prem quality manager, but to be fair, he did do a good job for them. Luton's manager John Still had joined the club in February 2013, at a time when promotion from the conference looked unlikely. Still guided the club to a 7th place finish, and after a slow start went on a club record 27 match unbeaten run, comfortably winning promotion to League 2. And in his first season back, in the 2014-15 season, did well, finishing 8th. But still, as a manager, after this didn't do too well in his career. The next season he was sacked and then spent time at Dagenham, Redbridge, Barnet and Maidstone. And right now he's not even a manager, he's the head of football for National League Southend. So I suspect Luton might get about 10 points with John Still in charge of the club right now in the Prem. 19th, Sheffield United. Yeah, again, no surprise here, as Sheffield were playing in League 1 in the 14-15 season, managed by the son of legendary Brian Clough, Nigel Clough. Now, unlike his father, Nigel wasn't ever an elite coach, but still did have a decent career. He was very harshly actually let go after this season, the 2014-15 season, despite making the playoff semi-finals with Sheffield and reaching a Carabao Cup semi-final. After this he managed Burton, and then now is managing Mansfield in League 2. Now Clough, unlike John Still, I think could get a decent amount of points, or be a bit of an upset king, because he was a bit of a cup specialist. As I said, he got Sheffield to the League Cup semi-final, beating Premier League West Ham and Southampton on their way. He also got to the semis of the Cup again, this time with Burton beating Aston Villa, Burnley, Forest and Middlesbrough. But they were admittedly thumped 10-0 on aggregate by Man City in the semis. So I think Clough at Sheffield might be on the end of some absolute batterings with this dreadful squad, but could pull off a couple upsets and would finish above Luton, as he's still a manager at least compared to John Still. 18th, Fulham. 2014-15 was a year Fulham fans would want to forget very quickly. It was their first season back in the Championship since 2001, and boy, it didn't go well. They started the season with Felix Magath in charge, but got rid of him after he quickly realised he was rubbish. They then put assistant manager Kit Simmons in charge, and he did pretty well, so they let him end the season, but they ended up finishing 17th and almost did a Sunderland, getting back-to-back relegations. And so I expect Fulham would probably be relegated this year, as Kit Simmons, yeah, I know I've never heard of him either, isn't even a manager. Literally this season's the only time in his career he's ever been a manager. He's always been an assistant manager, did pretty decent at that, but as a manager, he's poor. I still think despite not being a manager, he will still finish above Sheffield and Luton, purely on the basis that his squad is better though. But I think they will go down fairly easily. 17th, Crystal Palace. This year was a crazy one for Palace. They went through 3 managers and somehow finished 10th in the Prem. And the man who ended that season for them was Alan Pardew. However, despite having a good time at Palace, things collapsed for Pardew after this season, being sacked by them after winning only 6 matches of 36 in the year 2016. He then managed West Brom, but lost 8 games in a row, then went to Netherlands, Bulgaria, and most recently a Greek team. So it's safe to say Pardew is no longer a Prem quality manager, but I think he might be able to get something out of his squad and have just enough points not to relegate this side. And, you know, at least it's managed fairly recently compared to other guys. But yeah, things wouldn't be looking too good for Palace if they had Pardew back in charge right now. 16th, Wolves. The 14-15 season was actually a very successful one for Wolves. It was their first season back in the Championship, and they finished 7th, 1 place off the playoffs with 78 points, which was, at the time, I don't know if it still is, but that was the most points ever for a team not to get playoffs in the Championship. And while things went well for them, their manager was Kenny Jackett, who Wolves fans would be pretty happy hearing that name, as if it wasn't for him, it might have taken a lot longer for Wolves to be where they are today. He was very successful, however since Wolves, things haven't been good personally for Jackett. He left Wolves due to the new owners wanting a new man, and since then managed Rotherham, Portsmouth, and most recently Leyton Orient, doing okay but not great at those clubs. He's currently director of football at Gillingham, and I don't think would fare too well in the Premier League, but I think this Wolves team would have enough quality to stay up. 15th, Nottingham Forest. Another club who weren't in the Prem at this point. Forest, like Fulham, had a very poor 14-15 season, finishing 14th in the Championship. This was during their spell of disaster really, where they would spend money, sack managers every day, and finishing the bottom half of the Championship for about 7 years running. And this season followed the same pattern, with Stuart Pearce in charge at the start, but being replaced by Dougie Freedman. Now Freedman was actually not too bad for Forest, and is a pretty great footballing guy, and since 2017 he's been sporting director for Crystal Palace, and was behind the signings of players like Mark Gay, Michael Elise, Eberici Eze and others. So off the pitch, he knows his stuff, but as a manager, I mean, he's got a decent record, but he hasn't managed since 2016, so considering he's been out of the game for so long, I don't think it would go very well at Forest, but the squad has enough quality for them to stay up, and he has a bit more experience than someone like Kenny Jackett at the top level. 14th, Aston Villa. Aston Villa could be the team most affected by this alternate universe. Currently they are flying under Unai Emery in the top 4 in Europe. Things are great. But in 2014, things were awful. They just about survived in the Premier League, finishing 17th place, with Paul Lambert starting this season, but being sacked and replaced by Tim Sherwood. Yep, that's right, Villa fans. You would have Tim Sherwood as manager right now in this hypothetical world. Sherwood, to be fair, didn't do too bad in this season for Villa, keeping them up, but the next year was abysmal, losing 6 games in a row before being sacked. Sherwood, since this, has been director of football for Swindon Town, and then became a pundit on Sky Sports. So Villa fans would have a pundit in charge right now, instead of a 4-time European winner. But this squad has so much talent that surely he wouldn't mess it up too badly, and it would be able to just about survive, but I wouldn't put it past him to relegate this team. 13th, Newcastle. Just like Villa, Newcastle would be hit very hard by this alternate universe. They would have John Carver managing them versus AC Milan and PSG, which would be hilarious to see, but I fear what those results could be. Newcastle actually would have had Alan Pardew in charge, but he left for Palace halfway through this season, leaving Newcastle to appoint assistant John Carver in charge. Now I don't know which one would be worse, John Carver or Pardew in charge in 2024, but either way, both are not good. Carver somehow didn't get Newcastle relegated in 14-15 season, despite a run of 8 successive league defeats, a club record for Newcastle in the Prem. After this season, he left to manage some team in Cyprus for a year, and then went back to being an assistant. He's currently assistant for the Scotland national team, where he's actually been okay, and he's much better as an assistant than a manager. Like Sherwood, I think there's enough quality in this Newcastle squad for it not to be a complete catastrophe under him, but it would be by no means good. 12th, Brentford. 2014-15 wasn't too bad for Brentford, as they finished 5th in the Championship, losing in the playoffs to Middlesbrough. They were managed by Mark Warburton at the time, who did very well at Brentford, getting them to the Championship in his first season, and then a playoff semi-final, but surprisingly he was sacked after this year, but this was due to Brentford going in their new data-driven approach, not because he was a bad manager. After this he managed Rangers and got them back to the Scottish Premiership, but for an unsuccessful spell at Nottingham Forest, and a decent spell at QPR. So while there may be a bit of tension between Warburton and their current owners, as they're the ones who sacked him, I think Warburton is a perfectly capable manager, especially compared to others on this list, and with a solid Brentford squad, I think it's a comfy mid-table finish for them. 11th, Brighton. Unlike Brentford, this year was a complete mess for Brighton, who finished 20th in the Championship, sacking their manager midway through the season, but the manager they appointed would prove to be a bit of a monumental one for the club. They brought in Chris Hughton, who would go on to give Brighton promotion to the Prem for the first time in their history, and to be honest, if Hughton didn't come in, what we're seeing from Brighton right now probably wouldn't be happening. But after getting Brighton up and keeping them in the Prem, Hughton was sacked and hasn't really done much since. He managed Nottingham Forest and led them to Forest's worst start to a season since 1913. And to make it worse, after he left, Steve Cooper came in and got them promoted that same season. But to be fair, he's done well after that, becoming part of the Ghana national team set up during the 2022 World Cup, and then became head coach, but that didn't really work out as they were knocked out in the group stages of the African Cup of Nations. So, Hughton, I mean, he's a bit washed as a manager, but he's not complete garbage. we know, Dyche worked miracles for Burnley with a very poor squads, keeping them up for many years and even qualifying for Europe. Now this Burnley squad, I actually think talent-wise, is by far better than the squad Dyche had. But the question is, I don't know if it would be able to actually play Dyche ball. Nevertheless, a lot of the players such as Charlie Taylor, Jack Cork, Jay Rodriguez were all his players, and under Dyche, I think Burnley would actually do a lot better than under Company, and he would get them to a really solid 10th place. But that's mainly because he's by far and away the best manager I've mentioned so far in this video, which is a pretty damning indictment on what happened to these managers in 2014-15. Anyway, in 9th place we have Everton. So moving on to Dyche's current team, Everton, who I think would be perfectly fine without Dyche, as they would have current Portugal manager Roberto Martinez in charge. Now Martinez is a pretty good coach, despite it not really working at Everton, as he went on to manage Belgium to a 3rd place at the 2018 World Cup, and is now doing pretty well for Portugal. The only thing is, he hasn't managed in club football since 2016, which is 8 years ago now, so I don't know how well he would actually do right now if he returned to club football, especially with an Everton side who are not the most talented. But I think he would do okay and get them to a really good 9th place. 8th, West Ham. This is one West Ham fans probably wish wouldn't happen, but if it did, I think would actually be class. The return of Big Sam to West Ham. Sam Allardyce got West Ham back to the Prem at the first time of asking, and kept them there for 2 seasons before leaving at the end of the 14-15 season. He would go on to become a relegation firefighter, coming into Crystal Palace and saving Sunderland and saving Everton. Now admittedly his last jobs haven't gone well at West Brom and Leeds, getting both relegated, but to be fair, those were some bad squads. However, the reason I think this goes so well is because I think Allardyce's style is perfect for this West Ham side, because it's kind of like Moyes, just a bit more negative. West Ham currently have a very big, tall, athletic, strong squad with some gifted individuals scattered in there like Kudus and Paquetá. So I think Allardyce makes them a horrible side to play and gets them to a solid 8th place. And just imagine Thomas Soucek under Big Sam. It would be scenes. Anyway, 7th, Bournemouth. By far the biggest upturn in a team is Bournemouth, who would see the return of a club legend, Eddie Howe, to the club, and I think he would work wonders. Howe already did great with Bournemouth in the Prem, reaching 9th place with what I think was a much worse squad than this current Bournemouth team. It had the likes of Max Gradle, Benin Afobe, Charlie Daniels, Brad Smith, Harry Hart and Mark Pugh, who all, by the way, are Bournemouth legends, sure, but if we're being real, they're not at the level of the current Bournemouth players. So if Howe could get 9th place with that team, with a much better team, and not to mention Howe being a much better manager himself, showing he's a lot more pragmatic, I think Bournemouth would do great and could get a 7th place finish under Eddie Howe in this weird world I've created. Alright, into the top 6. 6th place, Chelsea. So into the top 6, where it remains the traditional top 6, but the order is a bit of a weird one. At 6th place is Chelsea, who are actually champions in the 14-15 season, under the special one, Jose Mourinho. Now I know a lot of Chelsea fans would be gassed, and also fuming at me for putting them only 6th, despite having Jose back for the 3rd time. And to be fair, this is one of the lists which maybe could even happen because Jose is out of the job. But the reasons I have put them 6th make sense. trophies, but I don't think people would say he's still one of the best managers in the world right now. I still think he's solid, but the main reason is because I think this Chelsea squad with Mourinho would probably implode. Sure, he would probably make them more effective, improve a lot of the players. I could see him turning Jackson into a good striker, as he does with many players. But as we all know, Mourinho and young players don't mix too well. Now, to be fair, he's done better at Roma with youth, but really for Jose to thrive, you need to give him ready-made squads. And this Chelsea squad is literally one of the youngest squads in the Prem. I can see Jose falling out with a lot of them, getting a little bit toxic, but overall, we should be able to get a top 6 finish with him. 5th, Manchester United. United wouldn't have the Dutchman Den Haag in charge this year, but instead would have the Dutchman Louis van Gaal in charge, which I don't know if United fans would be too happy about. Van Gaal did a okay job at United and maybe was harshly sacked, as he's a legendary manager, but I think a return to United in 2023 would be okay, but not amazing. Van Gaal has proven he's still a perfectly capable manager, getting Netherlands to a World Cup quarter-finals in 2022 and only losing on pens to the eventual winners, Argentina. So he's clearly still a good manager, and this current United squad is okay. So I think they could get 5th place, but I think, to be honest, it would be kind of similar to this season. A lot of inconsistencies, some bad results, some good, and in the end I actually don't think much changes for United, and they get 5th place. 4th, Spurs. Now for this one, we're going to have to pretend like the fans and board don't exist, as Pochettino will return to Spurs, which is something I don't think would go down too well with Daniel Levy or even the fans. Now he's a Chelsea manager. So let's imagine they don't care, and I actually think Poch being back at Spurs would do pretty decent. I think it would be very similar to Ange, where they would play some nice football, be a bit inconsistent but nice to watch. And Poch is a lot more pragmatic than Ange, so I think might actually do a better job than him and get a top 4 finish. Son, I think, would thrive back under Poch. Madison would be great, but I think overall the squad may lack a bit of quality for them to do anything more than 5th. But I think Spurs would be perfectly fine under Poch, and it wouldn't be a huge difference between him and Ange. Now I know Poch is doing awful with Chelsea, but this Chelsea squad is very different to the Spurs squad. I think the Spurs squad is a lot more experienced, and therefore he will do okay and get him a top 4 finish. 3rd place, Liverpool. Liverpool fans would be far from happy with this universe, as they would have to swap Klopp for Brendan Rodgers. Yep, Brendan back at Anfield. Not ideal, but I don't think it's that bad, to be honest. Liverpool have a great squad right now and a lot of talent, and Rodgers, even if you don't rate him, he's clearly a decent Premier League manager, so he surely wouldn't mess this up too much. Rodgers did do a good job at Leicester, winning an FA Cup and challenging for top 4, but it did fall apart and he got relegated, which is the last time he's been in the Prem. So for that reason I don't think Liverpool get top 2, as his Liverpool team is good but not incredible enough to carry Rodgers. And when it comes to that elite level, Rodgers is not really there. He's a pretty mid manager, so I don't think he would be able to turn Liverpool into title winners. Maybe they'll be in and around the title race, but I don't think they'll do anything serious. But they'll still finish a respectable 3rd place. 2nd, Arsenal. Now this one is funny because in the 14-15 season, Arsenal's captain was actually Mikel Arteta, and their manager, of course, was Arsene Wenger. So we would go back to those days, and I know a lot of Arsenal fans wouldn't be happy at all with this, as they all wanted Wenger out. But the return of Wenger, call me crazy, I don't think it's actually that bad. is great at developing players, and imagine some of the beautiful attacking football they would play with Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard, Jesus under Wenger. Arsenal, I think, would still be a great side if they had Wenger instead of Arteta, but I don't think they will be maybe as good and would still struggle, mainly because Wenger hasn't managed or coached since leaving Arsenal, so he might be a little bit rusty. That's really the only reason I see this not working out, but I think Wenger with his Arsenal squad could actually cook something and would be probably the most fun team to watch in the world. They just won't be able to win that title. So in first place, Man City. Yeah, despite Pep not being there, Man City for me still win the league, and fairly comfortably to be honest. They would have Manuel Pellegrini back at the wheel, who was a pretty good manager for them, winning them a league title and having a nice run in the Champions League before leaving for Pep. Pellegrini is a solid coach and still doing decent in 2023, managing Real Betis, getting them close to Champions League football, has been a really solid manager for them. He's still a pretty decent manager in 2023, been successful at City already, won league titles in England before, has by far and away the best squad in the league, so while they may not play some beautiful Pep football, get 100 points, win a treble, I think under Pellegrini, City still win the league with about 90 points, and yeah, I think they'll be perfectly fine, just not as dominant. So there we go, that is the league table. To summarise, this is what the league table in 2023-2024 would look like if you had your manager from 2014-15. 20th Luton, 19th Sheffield, 18th Fulham, 17th Nottingham Forest, 16th Wolves, 15th Crystal Palace, 14th Aston Villa, 13th Newcastle, 12th Brentford, 11th Brighton, 10th Burnley, 9th Everton, 8th West Ham, 7th Bournemouth, 6th Chelsea, 5th Man United, 4th Spurs, 3rd Arsenal, 2nd Liverpool, and 1st Man City. So quite a bit would change, but let me know, do you disagree with where I put your club? Would you even would you swap your manager